right, good evening. It's good to be back and talking more about God's Word and being able to open the Bible and to see what John has, the Apostle John has to enlighten us with, because he has really enlightened us a lot in regard to Jesus and belief. He uses a lot of symbolism, a lot of signs, miracles, events to be able to continue the story and to understand more about Jesus. And Jesus, of course, uses those opportunities, and we're going to see that tonight, where he uses opportunities of the past, of the tradition of the law, to be able to move forward his new law. And we're going to see that in a big way in regards to that in John 8. And we'll be going through the first part of John 8. And in my Bible, and also I believe the title it was called, the theme was Jesus is the light of the world. We're going to see a little bit more of that, as well as we continue on through the Feast of the Booths. And there's also another story in there, or another opportunity for teaching that Jesus has, and it's titled in my Bible, the woman caught in adultery. That's the first area that he goes through and discusses and uses that as a teaching opportunity. Before we get into it, let's go to our Father in prayer. God, our Father in heaven, we are so thankful that we have opportunity to learn from you, to be able to open your scriptures and to study it deeply and to understand it even more. And we are very appreciative of the opportunity to continue to study it. We've been through your word many times, and every time we do, we see something new and we see something important that brings us even closer to you and understand you more. We pray that'll happen again tonight as we go through and we open your word, that we study it and we apply it to our lives, make application, and just understand you more. We are so thankful for that. We're thankful for the group that meets here. We're thankful for your Son Jesus and what he has left us in this inspired word, as well as the sacrifice and the giving of him for us. And it's in his name that we pray. Amen. All right, so let's kind of think a little bit back on where we were at in regard to the timeline. In John 7, what was the theme there? What were they doing?
Festival of Booths.
The Festival of Booths, or also Feast of the Tabernacles, known to either one. And why was it called the Festival of the Booths?
They got booths.
They had booths, they had tents, they had dwellings that were temporary. What was the purpose of those? And we're going to kind of see this, because what Jesus does is very important throughout the entire chapter of 7 and also into 8. What were they doing? What were the Jews required to do? To commemorate, to go back, to remember. Remember what?
Being set free from slavery.
Say again?
Being set free from slavery.
Exactly. Be set free from slavery. To be able to understand that they were in the wilderness. They were going through that for how many years? Of course, 40 years. 38 years. They put 2 extra years on the beginning. But for that amount of time, they were wandering in the wilderness. They were to remember that. They were to remember the temporary status of it. They were to remember that they were not of this world. And they were also to remember and to look forward to who? The Messiah that was coming, right? So was this a perfect opportunity for Jesus to go in there and introduce and to be able to come into this world at that point? To start to be able to let them understand? Yes, absolutely was. And he uses that opportunity. But it wasn't on our time, it was on whose time?
God's time.
God's time, absolutely. It was God's time to be able to know when to go through, because what were the Jews already planning to do? The leaders.
Kill him.
They were planning to kill him. And he knew that. And he knew that it wasn't his time to do that. So he was careful when he was going through, making sure that he was able to set everything up instead of just go in there and die. Well, he was going to go in there and on his time to be able to set the message free. And we can see time and time again, and we're going to even see it this time, where it was God's time. And the Jewish leaders couldn't kill him until Jesus allowed it to come to pass. So a little bit of the setting of the timeline, we see that in John 7, 1 through 9, Jesus remained in Galilee with his brothers. And what was the purpose of that? Why was his brother so important at that point in the story?
They went up to the feast.
They were up to the feast, but they were also not true believers at the point, at least what Jesus said. They believed, but they weren't true believers, and Jesus made that a point in there to discuss that. They went up to the feast. They were pressing him to go in there and just go in there and show him, you are the Christ. Jesus says, not my time. So what does Jesus do?
Goes up secretly.
He goes up there, well, yeah, he goes up there quietly. And so he doesn't make a big rush, and he goes in there probably in the middle of the feast time frame, a Wednesday or so. And then he goes in there and he does what?
Proceeds to pick a fight with
Proceeds to teach. Proceeds to start teaching inside the courts of the synagogues in the area. So he starts doing public teaching in the temples, and then we see that. What does the crowd do?
They don't receive a lot of what he said very well.
No, as normal, as normal. So right away, and we talked about this. Jed talked about this in his class. A lot of times, people already have a set mindset. And we have to be careful of that, not to have a set mindset to be able to understand the truth. They didn't want to understand the truth. Why? They had a lot at stake, for one. They were already the leaders. They were able to understand the law. They were the ones who give the law, who teach the law, and that, etc. So it kind of moves into the last part of the feast, and that's where we're starting to pick up here, where we start seeing some of the lesson where it starts in John 8, verse 1. Actually, it starts, if you want to drop back just a little bit, it really starts in 53. So let's start in John 7, 53. And we'll read, if we can read let's just read to 11, and then we'll start picking that apart, because it's pretty important. Let's look at it in one big chunk, and then we'll start seeing what Jesus was really talking about. Can I get a reader?
They all went home. Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. At daybreak, he appeared in the temple again. And as all the people came to him, he sat down and began to teach them. The scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman along who had been caught committing adultery, making her stand there in full view of everybody. They said to Jesus, Master, this woman was caught in the very act of committing adultery, and Moses had ordered us in the law to condemn women like this to death by stoning. What have you to say? They asked him, this is a test, looking for something to use against him. But Jesus bent down and started writing on the ground with his finger. As they persisted with their questions, he looked up and said, if there is any one of you who does not sin, let him be the first to throw a stone at her. Then he bent down and wrote on the ground again. When they heard this, they went away one by one, beginning with the eldest, until Jesus was left alone with the woman. He remained standing there. He looked up and said, Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you? No one, sir, she replied. Neither do I condemn you, said Jesus. Go away and don't sin anymore.
Okay, I think it is important to kind of address also the placing of this section. Some of the earlier manuscripts don't have this within there. Why would you think that is? Why, in some cases, are manuscripts either absent or have something else in it? Go ahead, Jed.
What we know about this one is that this seems to be a later addition to the text.
An addition to it, or at least it was added to that section.
Yeah, it
Doesn't mean that it didn't happen, of course, because if we can see even in Luke, there's sections in there of the earlier books that had it, and then maybe that doesn't now. So it's one of those areas that were either added or not included in there. And I've seen some commentaries that said that it It was more or less, in some cases, maybe taken out because of the controversial part of it. What would be controversial about this?
Jesus pardons this woman's sin.
Jesus pardons a woman's sin.
Nobody's asked.
Or he wasn't following the law. And they also would say that at least some of the earlier manuscripts said that he may have been light on sin. We've seen that, but we're going to see as we go through here, none of that is really true, and we're going to be able to see where he did follow the law, and many different types of things. Why? Because he absolutely is here to follow the law, and he's also absolutely here to do what? Condemn the world? Save the world, right? And he still is following the law of Moses or the first law as well, as we see that. So let's start taking a look at this a little bit. So right away, let's kind of get an idea here. So Jesus is returning to the temple in verse 1 and 2. Returning to the temple, and this was probably, according to what I've read, is either a day after that everything ended, and he is still there teaching as he normally does. He's taken opportunity to go into the temple to teach. And we see that normally, this is kind of the picture that I see, is that he sits down back in that time. It isn't like where the teacher is standing up like I am, and we have everybody sitting down. It's the other way around, where he's sitting down, people come around and circle around him, and he's sitting teaching. So he's there. We don't know the size of the crowd, but we do know one thing, that there's going to be some Pharisees, and there's going to be some of the religious leaders there as well. So he's teaching them. And it says here, Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. Early in the morning, he came again to the temple. All of the people came around him, and he sat down and taught them. Typical pattern, as I said, and we've seen that even in Luke 21 and 37, where he teaches, taught until daybreak over at the Mount of Olives.
That's where he seems to stay the nights too, sometimes.
Say again?
He spends the night there.
Right. So in verse 3 through 6, it says, the scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman. So first of all, he's here teaching them. He's not teaching them about any of this stuff, apparently. He's just teaching them. So all of a sudden, it's almost like if I was teaching in here, and somebody just jumps in and just throws something there in front of me that's not even really up the topic. That's kind of what's happening here, it seems like. So here comes the scribes and the Pharisees, and they brought a woman who had been caught in adultery and placed her in the midst and said, Teacher, this woman has been caught in the act of adultery. Now, in the law of Moses, they commanded us to do what? Stone such a woman. So what do you say? So what are they doing, first of all? Do they really know what to do? Are they really asking for advice? Like, I really don't know what to do about this situation here. Could you help us out? I'm just lost.
They're testing him, but also it seems like they set it up.
Sort of entrapment.
Yes.
It was a trap,
Yes.
yeah.
So they waited for the right time. They waited for the group here. We are going to show that this Jesus is not who he says he is, because he's not going to be following the law. Mr. Neese.
Well, the man would be as guilty as the woman.
Well, yeah, we'll get there.
I was just going to say, if she was caught in adultery, where's the man?
Okay,
They didn't bring him.
so let's take a look at this. The Mosaic law requires both parties, right? Both parties to be punished, and that's Leviticus 20:10, and also Deuteronomy 20 and 22 and 22. So what does that man's missing in action kind of imply?
Maybe they couldn't catch him.
Well, he
They couldn't catch him, I don't know.
he was in the plot to set her up.
Okay.
Or they just didn't care about the sin itself.
Yeah, exactly, and that's it. It's part of the plot.
I got lots of ideas.
Yeah, he said it's part of the plot. Exactly. They didn't care about
They
that.
didn't care about punishing sin here.
No, and they also, were bringing this woman over here. Okay, she's almost like a sacrificial lamb. Okay, we're going to put her out there and see what Jesus says.
Well, the man could have been a Pharisee or
You never know. The point is they definitely were not doing. They were not doing what the Mosaic law says.
Well, and they obviously clearly had no concern for
For the law.
for the person that they were, dragging before Jesus. They're
Mhm.
considering her almost like an object. And I think that's the big difference
Right,
here. is
right,
that
right.
Jesus is considering her humanity.
Right.
And they aren't.
So what kind of application can we draw from this right ourselves? We shouldn't weaponize the scriptures trying to, because sometimes we see that happening. We may even try to do that, who knows? But we have to make sure that we don't sit there and try to use it against someone else. And we also see that, in fact, in Matthew 23 and 23 and Galatians 6 and 1. We see that the law's purpose is restoration, right? Okay, so we kind of have an idea right away that these scribes and Pharisees are up to no good. And of course, Jesus knows that immediately, right? So what does Jesus do? Let's take a look what he does. In verse 6, Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. Okay, so picture that. It's almost like, one second. Picture that, he's sitting there, he's almost like, okay, let's make a pause here for dramatic area. I'm thinking about this, what should I do? No, he wasn't. He already knew what he was going to do. He was setting up the stage. Sir.
So I've always thought, when he's writing on the ground, he's looking at the individual men. He's writing the sin they committed. And that's why they all fall back and don't.
Possibly, but it doesn't say that specifically.
I don't know, but
Right.
he had to write something to make them let them know.
Well, possibly.
Yeah.
Possibly. We don't know, but we do know he paused and he was waiting there and everybody's just like waiting. What's he going to do? I could just imagine that. The scene was probably intense. And then so what does Jesus say here? He says, "Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her." And he's echoing Deuteronomy 17 and 7, where the witnesses, right? What does it say there? The witnesses, how many is there supposed to be?
2 or more.
2 or more. 2 or more witnesses need to come together. And witnesses is not like, you know what, I heard Glenn tell me about this, so I'm going to go and talk to him, right? They had to be witnesses to be able to, of this area. It can't be just people saying that. Why is that so important? Somebody's life is on the line. I mean, this is murder. Okay, so Jesus says, "He who is without sin among them be the first to throw the stone at her." And he again once bent down again to stop again, to start writing on the ground, to poke at the ground, whatever he was doing. So was he talking about, what does he mean by sin, first of all? This is interesting too. Does he mean that just, sinful acts? I mean, we're all sinful. Everybody knows the sin is there.
I mean, maybe in this context specifically, he's saying, any of you who've never broken the law, you have the authority to throw the first stone.
Well, maybe, but I think what I've read is the sinful act was lie. Who's lying about this? I mean, if you're without the sin, if you were the one who witnessed it, stand up, let's go. Be the eyewitness. Say that you've seen it, you're going there. Go cast that stone. Go ahead.
One commentator I read remarked that there was so much infidelity and loose morals at this time that probably every man in that gathering
Yeah.
had some adulterous experience.
Well, and maybe that was even one of those in the crowd for all we know.
There's no record in the Bible
Right.
of any woman ever being executed for this.
But Jesus would be the only one that would know what each one.
The heart of everybody, right? Absolutely.
So if he's standing, that's why I said he knew what they did, and he just simply, without condemning them, points it out. Say, this is what you do, like so in a silent way.
He could be the only real true witness of the whole thing, right?
They all walk off. They all walk off. Well, I can't do it.
Go ahead, Neil.
Something else interesting was from the Mishnah, which is a Jewish tradition thing, but 2 priests, one of them can say, I'm a priest. That's not true. But if there's another man says you're a priest, and then they trade the remarks, you're a priest, then it's 2 witnesses.
You know, and I have this next section, 8 through 9, it's a conviction of conscience at this point. When he once again bends down and starts writing in the ground, so another silence. Let them think about this a while. Who knows how long it was, their consciences were thinking about it. Okay, is this right? Am I really doing what the Mosaic Law says? The answer to all those questions, and those Jewish leaders knew it, is no. They absolutely weren't. They were very within sin at that point because they were lying because they didn't follow the law, right? Their consciences were getting to them, and we can kind of see that in what happened here. But when they heard it, they went one by one, beginning with the older to the younger. They began to depart. So that scene, who knows how long it was in silence, but they were thinking about it. It's almost like with your kids, when you set them down and you let them, you give it to them, and you just let that silence sit there for a while as they're thinking about it, going over it. Am I with sin? Yes, I am with sin because, for one, I'm not following the Mosaic Law. I don't have the man there. And two, the witnesses. Where are the witnesses? Nobody's really saying that, I saw this, it's me. I'm going to cast that stone. Right? So their consciences were working on them. The older men leave first. That's interesting. Why do you think that is? They're probably more aware of the whole thing and the setup of it, and they were probably in on it, and so they're like, I better just move on out of here. Right? And as they continue to move on out, everybody started moving out. Everybody started to withdraw. And in verse 10 through 11, this is where grace and truth fall into it. So what does Jesus say? Jesus stood up. From then he stood up from the ground and said, woman. We talked about this before. When it's not a disrespectful thing when you say woman. Back then that was what they addressed the female sex. Woman. Where are they? So it's a question to him. Has no one condemned you? No one condemned you of this? She said, no one, Lord. And Jesus said, neither do I commend you, or condemn you. Go, and from now on, sin no more. What do we see there?
Why would he, if she hadn't done anything, why would he say don't sin anymore?
Well, yeah, I'm sure she was sinful in that
What I'm
case.
saying is, if he point out other things she's done, or is it specifically that's what?
All I know is it's specifically talking about this situation here that's being condemned before. I would probably assume, just based on the order and everything it said, was that she probably was adulterous. Who knows the whole background of it. However, within the law, you had to have 2 people, witnesses, both the man and the woman. There was nobody there to do that. Why? Because they were trying to set the situation up. So is Jesus breaking the Mosaic Law? No, not at all. People sometimes when they read this, they'll think, why is he doing that? You got to understand exactly what the situation is, and you got to go back to the old law. Mike?
A couple things when this story comes up, and also when they're getting ready to throw Jesus off a cliff and stone people in the New Testament. It always reminds me of when they were before Pilate. He says, take them and judge by your own law. The Jews said to them, these are the same people trying to kill Jesus right now and trying to kill this lady. It is not lawful for us to put anyone to death. And they said to him. But they're trying to do this all the time and bring it into their law and kill people.
Right. You know what really gets me in an emotional way is what Jesus said. Neither do I condemn you. Go. And from now on, sin no more. I mean, the sin that she did, or apparently did, was worthy of death. And what does he do? Doesn't condemn her. Told her to go and what? Sin no more. He doesn't condemn her.
Well, the paralytic, he can forgive his sin.
Right. And what did he tell him? Go and sin no more.
I don't remember saying that. You just pick up your bed and walk, and your sins are forgiven you. And my question, we're looking for sin, give sins but God. Well, Jesus was acting in the place of God.
Mhm. Yep.
And he, but those who have seen me have seen the Father. Well, we're seeing what God's like. God is a forgiving God.
Mhm.
And so this is, we're seeing how God would want us to live.
Right. And he also tells us the transformation. And the part that I was just talking about, Cam, was that when he saw him back in the temple, that's what he told him, that there's far worse than
Well, that
things
was,
that could
I
happen.
thought that was lame man.
Yeah, well, he's still paralyzed.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So anyway, the key is what? The transformation needs to be taking place, and that's what he is directing her towards. Any other comments on that? The impact and the power of that?
Well, there's a section where I think it's Jude talks about when Satan and to Michael argued about the body of Moses, and he wouldn't condemn Satan. He said, the Lord judge between me and you." So to judge righteous judgment, as you see in verse 24 of the last chapter, would be would have to include some kind of mercy or grace as well.
Right. Okay, let's move on. This, and then we shift gears. Another act, basically. If this was in a movie, you'd have another act, another scene that takes place. And this is still within the day after the booth, the ceremony. And this one is titled, "I am the light of the world." And it says in verse 12, "Again, Jesus spoke to them, saying, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but have the light of life." So, picture it again. It's probably the same situation where he's at the temple, he's sitting down, he's speaking to all the folks, they're listening to him, and then he takes an opportunity. What is that opportunity from when we're talking about, where he starts talking about the light of the world? Because we know that within the temple, within the Feast of the Booths, there's a part of the ceremony that they have festival lamps that come up, that are shown. What are the lamps representing in that feast, in the festival of the Booths? What do those lamps represent? The light that they have to follow and watch. You know, do you remember in the old law when the Israelites by night, what would they have to follow? Pillar of fire, right? That's the light. And they would have that in the feast, the Feast of the Booths, where they would, the festival, where they would have a ceremonial part where they would bring these huge lamps of light. And supposedly the lights were so bright they could just see them everywhere, just like the pillars of light. And that represented being able to follow the Lord or God around different areas, because He is going to give them the light to be able to see. Right? I mean, you know, we see that where they use that representation of darkness and light, and where even just the smallest little bit of light, of course, can overpower darkness easily. But Jesus takes the opportunity here to be able to, the last day, what I understood also was that section of the lights where they had the light show of the lights that were hugely down there. So Jesus takes the opportunity and says, "You just saw the lights, right? Well, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness." Just like that. They don't want to walk in darkness as they so they remember those lights, but will have the light of life. So what do you think they were thinking at that point? They're probably wondering, what does that mean? It's like riddles again, you know? We just had light. We were just remembering back what God did for us with the pillars of light, and now we got a guy here who says that he is the light of the world. See how he's starting to link that together? He's linking that together with them. We see that also, you know, some of the Old Testament background in Isaiah 9, Isaiah 60, Psalms 27. And light represents, of course, the purity, divine presence, all of that is within that light. And He is the light of the world. He's unpacking that for them. So we have some disputed testimony coming here in the next couple of verses in 13 and 14. So the Pharisees here, there comes the Pharisees again, right? Here they are. What are they, first of all, they're trying to do? They're trying to disprove him as the Christ. They're also trying to do what? Kill him. They're trying to find things to kill him. Why couldn't they have done it in the first place when he healed on the Sabbath? Well, because they couldn't, right? Because he proved them wrong again. Why couldn't he do it when they were trying to get him to say that he's not following the Mosaic law? They couldn't. They all left. They understood that. And now here comes the Pharisees again. So the Pharisees said, "You are bearing witness about yourself. Your testimony is not true." Jesus answered them, "Even if I do bear witness about myself, my testimony is true, for I know where I come from and where I am going." What's he talking about there? He doesn't need human proof, first of all. It almost sounds like, he doesn't need anything to bear witness about him. You are bearing witness about yourself. Yeah, he can bear witness about himself. He says he can even, if I do bear witness about myself, my testimony is true. For I know where I came from and where I am going. So what does that tell them? They don't know where they came from and where they're going. So if he says, I know where I am, what's he telling them in retrospect? They don't know. So we have the difference between, in 15 and 16, we drop into a judgment area. It kind of shifts gears again, where it's earthly versus heavenly judgment. And in 15 and 16, you judge, and he's talking to who when he says that? Pharisees. You judge according to the flesh. I judge no one. Yet, even if I do judge, my judgment is true. For it is not I alone who judge, but I and the Father who sent me. How do you think they're going to take that?
They already recognize that he has said that he was the same as God. God was his Father.
Yes, and it's just working them up more and more, right? So he says that, first of all, how is their judgment? It's according to the flesh. What they see, it's according to the flesh. And he says, I judge no one, specifically according to the flesh. But he says, yet, even if I do judge, my judgment is true. He is the true judge, right?
Well, he's got the Father judging with him, so there's your two witnesses.
Yeah, that's the two witnesses. That's right, and that's what the notes reflect. So he's going back to his two witnesses that he needed to witness.
And the people, the leadership couldn't kill him after the paralytic walked and he'd been healed on the Sabbath, because the people had seen that. Mm-hmm. On this occasion, there's no miracle going on here. Mm-hmm. No miracle with the woman's sins being forgiven. So there's more opportunity to go after him now. Mm-hmm. Than there was in some of the other circumstances.
Right. And what Neil is talking about when he says the two witnesses, that is invoking Deuteronomy 19 and 15, the need for the two witnesses. Exactly. And what were the two witnesses about? Who he was, the light of the world. Where they said, no, you're talking crazy. You're bearing witness about yourself. He's not bearing witness about himself because he has the two witnesses, himself and the Father. Okay, so in verse 15 through 16, we got the earthly versus the heavenly judgment. And this is where we're going to get into it a little bit more on the two witnesses in 17 through 18. It says, in your law, it is written that the testimony of two people is true. I am the one who bears witness about myself, and the Father who sent me bears witness about me. So there's what he's talking about. So he really breaks it back out and explains it to them, how he has the two witnesses that these folks are trying to get him on or trying to explain to him.
Of course, that's blasphemous to them.
Yeah. Because they're still not believing that either, are they?
Well,
They don't want to.
The Father testified of Jesus by allowing him to do miracles, because Nicodemus says no one can do these things except God be with him. So the miracles that Jesus performed was the way the Lord was testifying of Jesus.
Right. And that's in John 5 and 36, that the works of the miracles serve as the divine collaboration, that he is the Father and the Father sent him. Very good.
And he bear witness at the baptism as well, transfiguration.
Right. Also it says, believe because the Father works confirm the Son's works, and that's in Acts 2 and 22. Same thing. All of these types of things have been placed out there for him. Very good.
Reminds me of that Jesus, I guess he's still in the temple here teaching.
Yes.
But reminds me of when he was 12 years old, didn't you know I'd be in my Father's house? His message hasn't changed there.
Right.
He's saying, I'm here in my Father's house. And he's talking about that he's from the Father as well.
Right. And then they tried to further trap him, or at least debate back and forth with him in verse 19 and 20. So they said, "Where is your Father?" Jesus answered, and on this, "Where is your Father?" It's almost like a derogative. It could be, we don't know if it's with a capital F or not. Where is your Father? So it's one of those types of questions to him. And Jesus answered, "You know neither me nor my Father. If you knew me, you would know my Father also." These words he spoke in the treasury. No one arrested him because his hour had not come. So what is he saying here, basically? When they ask, "Where's your Father?" It would be like me, challenging somebody else to what they said specifically. And Jesus answered him, "You don't know me. You also don't know my Father. Because if you did, what would they do? They would know who he was." Specifically. And also he went further on and says, these words he spoke in the treasury. No one arrested him. Why? Why didn't they arrest him? If it was treason, if he was talking blasphemy, could they have arrested him? Yeah. But no one was, because it wasn't his time. Also, I also understood, just to kind of go back on, aside from what I heard or read in the commentaries, is that one of the areas as well of the stoning or the killing, the Romans were against that, and it would be in conflict, or at least against what the local laws were also talking about. So it was a little bit iffy there as well on what the Jews could actually do on their own. Go ahead.
It's interesting that he says, in your law,
Yeah.
the law of Moses, but he says your law.
That's right. And also, even his law, their law that they were doing still wasn't even really following the law of Moses as well. Yeah.
Well, they had no clue what they were talking about. That was this whole conversation. Jesus says, you don't know what you're talking about.
So this is the sober warning that he gives right in the next verse, what you're alluding to here in 21 and 22. "I am going away, and you will not seek me, and you will die in your sin. Where I am going, you cannot come." And then what did they say? "Will he kill himself?" They said. So what were they trying to get at there? A suicidal thing? If you're a suicidal thing, what did the Jews believe? You're going to be going down into Hades, right? So what does Jesus say? No, he says, "Where I'm going, you will not seek." So in other words, what he's saying is, where I'm going, you're not going to be able to go. And that's when they came back with a smart remark saying, "Well, what are you going to do? Kill yourself?" So, we're going to heaven. Where are you going, Jesus? Basically. And Jesus told him what? You can't come. You're not going to be coming with me. Why is that? Why was he telling them that? Because they didn't believe it, for one. And we know what the results are in that situation. Okay, so in verse 23 and 24, "You are from below. I am from above. You are of this world. I am not of this world. I told you that I would die. I told you that you would die in your sins, for unless you believe that I am He, you will die in your sins. Pretty eye-opening. Pretty eye-opening. And you know, you would think that at that point, you know, that they would believe in the deity. At that point, they did not. And then he goes on and says, you know, who the 25 and 26 is found, who are you? And they said to him, who are you? Jesus said. Jesus, what I have been telling them from the beginning, I have much to say about you and much to judge, but he who sent me is true, and I declare to the world what I have heard from him. So he's speaking from the Father specifically. In verse 27, they did not understand that he had been speaking to them about who? About the Father. They didn't understand. An ongoing theme. Unbelief rooted from spiritual deafness. Who knows? Could be from their own stubbornness. They knew the law, supposedly. Jesus even confronted them on that. And they still didn't believe him. Was it spiritual deafness? That's some of the application that we have. We need to be able to pray at times for illumination, to be able to understand about what God has for us.
We know from some of the other gospel accounts that they were super jealous of him. They delivered him up out of envy. So
Yes.
we need to do a heart check and make sure we don't have heart problems stopping us from seeing because they saw the same miracles everyone else did,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and they reacted totally differently to them.
Yeah. In verse 28, let's see. Did we read that one yet? Okay. When you have lifted up the Son of Man, then you will know that I am He, and that I do nothing on my own authority, but speak just as the Father taught me. So what is he talking about when you lift up the Son of Man?
Crucified.
Exactly. When you crucify him, he's saying, then you will know that I am He.
The Roman soldier said he must be sure to him.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I would imagine they perceived that he was talking about some sort of an exaltation. And that probably irritated him, for him to say something like that.
Yeah. Well, it's just firing him up more and more.
Yeah.
The whole thing is. And on the cross, he is going to prove his divine mission.
You know, when you lift me up.
Yes.
When you
Then you
exalt
will.
me.
Mhm.
And that, there's not exaltation.
Yeah, exactly.
He was mocking God.
Exactly. And in verse 29, and he who sent me is with me. He has not left me alone, for I always do the things that are pleasing to him. He is totally focused on his Father. Then verse 30. As he was saying these things, many believed in him. So there were folks who believed in him as they were going through. Did the Jewish leaders? No, they didn't, but many did. Very similar to us now, same thing. Thank you for your time.
Good job.